I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Today, we're joined by an author who brings rare, real-world national security experience straight into the pages of high-stakes fiction. Chad Boudreaux began his federal career at the U.S. Department of Justice on the eve of September 11th, launching him into the heart of America's counterterrorism response. His work later carried him to the Department of Homeland Security and into senior leadership roles advising on some of the country's most critical security challenges. Now he channels that insider knowledge into unputdownable thrillers that blur the line between fiction and headlines. His latest, Mob Justice, takes readers into modern Chicago, where Justice Department Attorney Blake Hudson confronts a criminal empire that is smarter, quieter, and far more dangerous than its Hollywood reputation. Chad, it is great to be with you again. Welcome back to the conversation.
Really great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Tell us the 411 about Mob Justice.
So Mob Justice is the sequel to Scavenger Hunt. So the second book in a series that hopefully will have a long life. But Blake Hudson returns as the protagonist. And this time he's no longer fighting terrorists. He's fighting the Chicago Mafia. And we've resurrected the Chicago Outfit, which was Scarface, Al Capone's mob, and then also the North Side Gang, which Capone had all but eviscerated back during Prohibition. Now they have come back, and Blake finds himself right in the middle of it.
What drew you back to Chicago and that particular area of writing?
So I write about things that fascinate me, and that particular era of organized crime really fascinated me. And I love the city of Chicago. Sometimes it gets a bad rap, but there's a lot of very interesting history there. The book itself is current day, but there's really the ghost of Capone is there. And I do bring the reader up to speed on what happened, hopefully in a way that's not too laborious. But I think as you read the book and you're caught up in the day-to-day of the book, you learn a lot about the mafia of the past. The Department of Justice, which is where I grew up, is a center focus for combating organized crime. And back in the day, they had a unit called the Organized Crime Strike Force. That unit is no longer existent. But one of my mentors, maybe my main mentor, was a charter member of that. And he used to tell me stories at the main Justice building, a lot of times on Saturday mornings, about what they did on the Organized Crime Strike Force. And so paying a little homage to him, and he passed away several years ago, but we brought it back to life and put our characters right in the middle of it.
I love your protagonist. Blake Hudson keeps finding himself caught between legal boundaries and moral necessity. Why are those gray areas so compelling to explore?
Because they're real. So when you listen to either MSNBC or Fox News or pick your program, you get one side, and it's normally a side that has a political stake in whatever debate that's going on. The real world is a lot different. What I really want to do is I want to pull the reader behind the scenes, behind the curtains, if you will, and show them really what a real life situation looks like. Now, here we're dealing obviously with fictional characters and fictional circumstances, but the tensions are actually pretty real. And it's things that people have to deal with behind the scenes all the time. And we never hear about them, but I find them fascinating. I wrestled with them when I was in government. I know current government officials have to wrestle with them all the time. I want to bring this to light.
Your bad guy, Enzo, is a fascinating character. He's loyal to the outfit, yet he's very complex and conflicted. What inspired him?
Yeah, so Enzo Renzi is, I agree, an interesting character. We just had Robert Duvall pass away, and one of his main characters in film was the consigliere for The Godfather, and just a fascinating role. But that kind of brought I think, to a lot of people's attention, certainly mine, what that role actually entails. And that's what Enzo Renzi's role is. He is a Supreme Court clerk who, instead of going the law firm route or the main justice route, decided he was going to go into organized crime. And you learn why throughout the book. But he's not a bad guy at heart, but he's working for a bad bunch. And so he's dealing with different tensions. And one of my favorite scenes in the book is when Enzo Renzi and Blake Hudson sit down unexpectedly, and they have a conversation about what happens next. You have prosecutor versus criminal sitting at a table at a restaurant that many will be familiar with in Chicago, one of my favorite restaurants, the Chop House, with the backdrop of all of the gangsters on the wall. You have the Gatling gun on the wall, and then you have this conversation, and what they find is they actually have a lot in common.
We're talking with Chad Boudreaux about his new book, Mob Justice. His website is Chad Boudreaux, spelled BOUDREAUX.com, chadboudreaux.com. Your thrillers feel very grounded in reality. How do you balance authenticity with pacing and entertainment?
I have two schools of thought that I bring into my writing process. I try to balance it myself, but my editor is very much an expert in his field, and he does not like things to slow down. So he makes sure that I remain sped up. And then I have my law enforcement, intelligence, legal community, and I'll always pick one or two beta readers for that to make sure that I get lingo correct and make sure that I get all the processes correct. In Mob Justice, one of the areas where I needed a little help and research was with wiretapping. Wiretapping is a pretty common phenomenon, obviously, in organized crime, prosecutions and investigations and policing. And I'd never done it before. And so I got experts from the FBI that had not only walked me through how they go about doing that, but then also there's a full lingo around that. So I had to go back and rewrite a lot of the conversation and dialogue because the lingo wasn't what it needed to be. And so hopefully we got to the right spot, but that all helps. I think reality coupled with knowing you have to keep the pace to keep the reader locked in is key. And then if you hit that balance, you've done your job.
Mob Justice raises the stakes significantly after Scavenger Hunt. Did you always envision Blake Hudson as a continuing character?
I did not. So when I wrote Scavenger Hunt, I fell in love with Blake Hudson as a character. And he's an amalgamation of a lot of people that I worked with when I was a young lawyer at DOJ, kind of like he is. And when I published Scavenger Hunt, I had already started writing Homecoming Queen, which is my second book. It's off-brand, but I got all of these requests for more Scavenger Hunt and more Blake Hudson, and also a couple of other characters that may or may not have survived Scavenger Hunt. But the requests were such that I just started thinking, and talking with my publisher was thinking about, I think all the 10 stories that I have in my head can all be Scavenger Hunt series. And I think Blake Hudson is a pretty good protagonist for a lot of those. And so where we are now, Terry, is we found ourselves, what I'd like to do, given my background in DOJ, all my stories are somehow grounded in DOJ, because DOJ has, whether you like the agency or not, it has a wide purview of areas of responsibility. And so whether you're talking about terrorism or border security or mob justice, organized crime, cyber criminals, all these things that would be fascinating to write about, they all can find themselves housed within DOJ. And if that's the case, if Blake Hudson survives this book or the next one, maybe he is part of many more.
Chad Boudreaux is our guest. We're talking about Mob Justice, the sequel to Scavenger Hunt. What challenges come with writing a sequel that must satisfy returning readers while still welcoming new ones?
Yeah, I think just making sure that the characters that survive your predecessor books need to keep all those same characteristics moving forward. So when I had Blake Hudson, we'll just stay on him. When I had Blake Hudson in Scavenger Hunt, there were situations that I put him in, and I really didn't know how he was going to respond. I'm writing it. There's a little bit of hocus pocus there, but they have certain character traits. And when you put them into extreme situations of trial and adversity, they have to respond in kind. And so when you jump from one book to the other and they're faced with a completely different dilemma and trial that they have to overcome, I think making sure that you get the consistency with the character correct is really the main challenge.
You've been doing this for a while now. What's different about being a writer from being a professional in the biz?
I think that for me, I've got a formula now, and I feel comfortable that I know exactly how I'm going to go about writing my book. Scavenger Hunt took me 18 months over 20 years to write. My next 2 books took me 9 months to write. And so I know exactly the way I'm going to approach it. But I spend a lot more time on marketing and the publishing side of things than I do writing. So I think that's a difference. And now with 3 books, there's still things that I'm doing with Scavenger Hunt, and you just can't leave it totally behind. They try to convince you to do that, but some people want to talk about Scavenger Hunt. Some people want to talk about Homecoming Queen. And so a lot of people now with release date coming up in a couple of weeks want to talk about mob justice.
Loyalty and betrayal, those seem to be your recurring themes. Why do they resonate so strongly in political and crime thrillers?
I think that's what drives those things. I think that's what drives politics and crime is there's always demand for loyalty and there's always betrayal. And they're fascinating concepts. You don't want to be a part of being betrayed, but you see it every day. And also, I think for me, a good book, particularly a novel and a thriller or a crime novel, they need to have a lot of adversity and trial. And otherwise, it's just ho-hum. And those 2 concepts of loyalty and betrayal can really ratchet up the tension if you approach it the right way.
What was the hardest thing to write in this book for you?
I had some new characters that I introduced, and getting them incorporated into Blake Hudson's world was a little difficult because I think with Blake, the main thing, there are some people that want Blake to be something that he's not. And maybe one day Blake's going to know it all and have all the tools to do everything and be the Jack Ryan of a book. But Blake is a naive, good-hearted lawyer who's extremely bright. And so he overcomes a lot of challenges that he gets into because he starts out with that naivete. And I think he trusts people a little bit more than he should. And so making sure that those new characters come in and play well with what I want Blake to be doing, how I want him to end up at the end of the book is probably the most complicated part of it.
All of us who write dream about seeing our characters on the big screen. If Blake was going to be in a television series, who would you want to have portray him?
I'd actually want an actor that nobody knows about. I'd want somebody new on the scene. My favorite, I love Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan. I love Jason Bourne and Matt Damon as Jason Bourne. Those are great flicks. But I think for at least like with Matt Damon, I don't think he was known, he certainly wasn't known as much as he is now when he was in The Bourne Identity. And I think some characters are just some actors are already typecast. And so I wouldn't want a typecast actor being Blake Hudson. I'd want Blake Hudson to make an actor for himself.
Who do you like better, Tom Cruise or Alan Ritchson in Reacher?
They are 2 totally different characters to me. You know what? I like them both. I'm a Tom Cruise fan. I grew up in the late 70s and 80s, and in the 80s, he was catching his groove. But the series Reacher is just completely different. And I totally understand that from the book standpoint, Reacher needs to be huge, like Herculean. And Tom Cruise is certainly not that. I do like how the series really presses into his physique, and meaning his big body. He crushes people and is very intimidating. And you certainly don't get that with the first one. So I'd actually say I like the Jack Reacher movies. I like the Jack Reacher movies better than the series, but I like the character in the series probably than I do in the movie, if that makes sense.
Feels like Alan's more what Lee Child envisioned than Tom Cruise was, but Lee told me that Tom's check cleared and he was happy to give it away to him.
And that's a different question. Like if you said, would you rather Tom Cruise or the other guy be Blake Hudson? I would definitely say Tom Cruise 100 times over, because that's where you're going to get your blockbuster.
Chad Boudreaux is our special guest. We're talking about mob justice. Can we expect more from Blake Hudson? You got more stories for him in your mind?
I do. Spoiler alert, he survives mob justice, but he will. There was a character in my first book named Jack Reed, and Jack Reed is a Ground Branch CIA, retired Ground Branch CIA operative, our paramilitary officer, and he's much more troubled than Blake Hudson, but he was one of the characters that readers of Scavenger Hunt said they wanted to see a lot more of. And including people that I talked to about like series and film, they really like that character a lot. And so he is my protagonist in my fourth book, which will be Borderfall. That's the tentative name for it. And we're going to find him down on the border and probably sometimes in Mexico when he's not supposed to be. But I do think Blake will make a cameo in that book. I haven't written those scenes yet, but they're in my outline, and I think he plays perfectly into what I need to have happen in that book.
What do you hope readers will take away from Mob Justice?
I hope they have a good time reading it. It's all about entertainment. I think you will learn something along the way about the world of organized crime and certainly law enforcement related to that. Like we mentioned earlier in this discussion, you're going to learn a little bit about the tensions that are inherent both on the criminal and the law enforcement side. But I don't think a book is good unless you have trouble putting it down. And so I hope that once they put the book down, it hasn't been a long time since they started it. And if that's the case, then I've done my job.
You've done a lot of these interviews. Is there a question that you haven't been asked that you wish you had?
That's a good question. I don't know. I tend to like the questions about how I balance my day job and my writing career, because that's something I have to grapple with every day. So I do get that question from time to time. I don't think I've gotten it from you, so I'll just answer it. It's working for a Fortune 500 publicly traded company that does like really cool things in the military space today is a full-time job. But I think what I like to tell people who listen and who are aspiring writers or maybe struggling authors is just stay with it. Because for those of us who love our craft and we like telling stories, it's worth it. It really has been a good journey, and it's my outlet. I don't watch a whole lot of TV. We talked the TV that I do watch is normally the Reacher stuff and the Bourne series and things like that. But it's doable, but it just takes a lot of discipline, and you have to be able to hear a lot of people say you can't do it and just tell them you're wrong and keep going. But those are kind of questions I like to address.
Is it therapeutic to write?
Absolutely. It's absolutely therapeutic. And look, I'm blessed. I don't have deadlines. And so I can write when I want. And the only thing I have to worry about is scheduling time for my editor or other people who support me. And there are a lot of them. It's really my own time. So I've taken that stress off of it.
The website is Chad Boudreaux, Boudreaux, chadboudreaux.com. The book is Mob Justice, written by our special guest today, the author himself, Chad Boudreaux. Chad, this has been great. It's great to see you again. Thanks for the conversation.
Great to see you, Terry. Have a great day.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.